A talented painter meets a fellow artist who forces him to see what's hiding in the darkness. In 1909, in Arkham, Massachusetts, a painter, William Thurber, sneaks into the house of his girlfriend, Rebecca. He paints a picture of her, but Rebecca's father arrives and calls out to his daughter. William instructs her not to answer, but she still responds, so he rushes to wear his coat and climbs down the balcony before leaving on his bicycle. Later, at Miskatonic University, William listens to his friends Smithfield and Joe argue about Impressionists. During their art class, the professor, Bosworth, announces that the deadline for the Student Art Prize is approaching. Also, the best art piece, which will be judged by the committee, will be displayed at Arkham Gallery. Bosworth adds that this kind of opportunity can be the making of a young artist, looking at William, the previous year's winner. Afterward, Bosworth introduces a new student to their class, Richard Upton Pickman. Seconds later, their model removes his clothes and poses for them. Then, the professor sets the timer to 15 minutes and instructs the students to draw what they see. As they draw, Bosworth reminds them to remember their basic shapes. Noticing Richard drawing aggressively, William pretends to wash his hands to see his work. He is astonished to see Richard's haunting and unique drawing, but something seems to bother him. The professor then asks why William is wasting time staring at Richard's drawing, so he returns to his seat. That night, William and his friends gather in a pub and discuss Richard's drawing. Joe jokingly assumes Richard is already 80 years old and has a sour personality. Their other buddy, Doyle, says he heard that Richard's mother was from Arkham. According to him, there's a rumor that she killed herself when Richard was a child, and her husband went mad shortly after. But thanks to Richard's inheritance, he's been rambling around Europe for the past decade. Smithfield believes Richard won't make it as Miskatonic since the point of the class is to draw what they see, not rotting flesh. But Joe tells them maybe that is what he saw, while Doyle adds that the man draws in the cemetery. Later, William visits Richard at the cemetery and calls him by his surname. The man wants to be called Richard, but William prefers to call him Dickie. Richard is drawing a dead cat that he thinks the rats killed. William compliments his piece in Bosworth's class, but Richard believes the professor likes William's work more. William urges Richard to join the art prize since it's quite the opportunity, but the older man claims he's not interested in prizes. With this, William asks what he's interested in, so Richard shows his sketchbook full of disturbing drawings. After looking at them, William describes them as powerful. According to Richard, his interests include darkness, ugliness, and corruption. He claims that suffering is living, adding that they can't let sympathy and altruism shield them from fighting the world's truths. So, William asks where one finds elusive truths, to which Richard replies where fear lives. At home, William draws his entry for the art prize. He tries to copy Richard's drawing style, but he struggles. Unfortunately, in the end, he fails to draw anything. The following day, William makes an excuse to his friends, saying he's not submitting an entry to give them a chance to impress the judges. William then asks where Richard is, to which Joe responds the man is inside the room. Suddenly, the judges, including Bosworth, storm out of the room, so William goes inside and asks what happened. Richard claims he needs a better audience for his work, adding that he's starting to doubt his teachers really have anything to teach. Afterward, William invites him to some sort of ritual with his friends after a harsh critique. But instead, Richard asks William to come to his house to show him his paintings. Later at home, Richard lets William see his artworks. As usual, his paintings are different and disturbing. William points out that he never showed the paintings in his house, but Richard says he has a much stronger illustration to show him. As William looks at a painting depicting hanged women, Richard shares that his family has been in New England for generations, since before the witch trials. He then reveals his painting behind the curtains, which shows his great-grandmother's great-grandmother, Lavinia, who was branded a hex and burned at the stake. William can't help but stare at the painting, which he imagines is moving. At the same time, Richard's family gossip claims that Lavinia killed her husband during a rite and served his flesh to the members of her coven. Richard also confesses that sometimes he'd wake in the night and hear them through the floor. William's head soon starts hurting, and he hears some distant chanting and distorted laughter. Also, the people in the painting move. Richard then asks if William hears his kin from beneath them, but the young man grabs his hat and rushes to leave the place. Outside, William throws up and notices a carriage passing by. As he looks inside the carriage, he sees a man with a large bleeding wound on his head being intimate with a woman whose chest is blackened. The carriage stops as the two notice William staring at them. Then, through the window, a hand beckons William over. The carriage door opens, but as William gets closer, a disfigured woman appears and scratches him. Afterward, William awakens in bed, relieved it was only a nightmare. But his ripped shirt indicates that something did happen the previous night. Joe knocks before entering William's room and informs him that it's already afternoon. so he immediately dresses for a party he's supposed to attend. As he arrives at Rebecca's place, William apologizes to his girlfriend since the party is about to end. He also asks for whiskey from a server, which disappoints Rebecca. Rebecca then introduces William to her Aunt Lizzie, but quickly leaves to find her father. Lizzie asks William about his art, stating that Rebecca told her he specializes in portraits. But William notices the disfigured woman walking toward the trees, looking at him. Shocked, he leaves Lizzie and grabs a drink. Rebecca calls William after a few minutes, which startles him. Ignoring that, Rebecca introduces her father, Charles, to William, but William realizes that he's the man inside the carriage. Suddenly, the mysterious, disfigured woman appears behind Charles and frightens William, causing him to step back and hit a server. Embarrassed, William immediately leaves, but Rebecca follows him. She asks him what's wrong, and William stammers as he points to the woman beside Charles. William desperately tries and fails to tell Rebecca it's not the same woman he saw, confusing the lady. Then he wonders what's happening to him, but it soon dawns on William that Richard's painting did something to him, and he apologizes to Rebecca. However, Rebecca believes it's because of his drinking and tells him to leave, adding that she doesn't recognize him anymore. Out of anger, William returns to Richard's place to confront him about his paintings. Unfortunately, the room is empty, and Richard is nowhere to be found. Still, there are some disturbing drawings on the wall. 17 years later, Joe continues to argue with his colleagues about art. Meanwhile, William becomes a gallery curator and tastemaker whose opinion is greatly valued by renowned artists. When he gets home, William notices a wrapped painting and hears his family talking about art. He follows the voice of his wife, Rebecca, who's talking to their son, James. As a loving father, he expresses appreciation for his son's drawings. Rebecca then instructs James to brush his teeth and prepare to go to bed. In the bedroom, Rebecca asks if William is tired, and he responds he's exhausted. Despite that, she goes on top of him to make love, adding that she'll be quick. In the middle of the night, William, who looks younger, awakens alone in a different room and feels pain in his body. He goes downstairs and realizes he's in a different house, calling a server only to be ignored. William also hears music from the dining room, which piques his interest. The doors to the dining room open for William, and he is surprised to see a feast. He then spots Lavinia, the witch, drinking and eating with the members of her coven. At the same time, William notices the severed body parts on the table, along with some insects and crustaceans. Suddenly, the whole group stares at him and the head on the table opens its eyes. William soon awakens, revealing that it was all a nightmare. Bothered, he rushes downstairs to check the covered painting. It isn't long before William sees the painting, which shows some creatures devouring a child. The painting greatly affects William, so he attempts to destroy the illustration with the letter opener. However, it's as if the painting has some powers, forcing William to point the letter opener at his forehead instead. Luckily, Rebecca arrives, and William comes to his senses. He covers the painting and goes to the other room with Rebecca, asking if she met who sent the painting. So, Rebecca states that the man said he knew William, adding that it was Richard and that he's back in town. Meanwhile, curious James quietly takes a peek at Richard's painting. The next day, William instructs a gallery employee, Gabriel, to return the painting to its center. Afterward, William and his colleagues gather to discuss the year's exhibition. Joe announces that he invited a special guest and wants the group to consider his artwork. Surprisingly, Richard arrives, shocking William. Richard brought several paintings to show to the committee, so Joe invites everyone to the gallery for viewing. On the other hand, William tries to stop his colleague, Dr. Reed, but the man says he'll get his turn. So he tells Joe instead that Richard's paintings cannot be shown at an exhibition, but Joe believes that William is just afraid of competition. On his way to his house, William spots a creature running across the cemetery and hiding behind the bushes. Although he's scared, he just ignores it. As he gets home, he immediately hugs his wife. William tells her he has something to say but can't since he has a headache. Rebecca then informs him that they have a guest. To William's surprise, Richard is in the living room drawing with James, wanting to catch up with his old friend. During dinner, Richard talks about supernatural things. He states that it's his business to catch the undertones of the soul and claims his art is about the ancient. Fascinated, Rebecca shares how she, William, and other Miskatonic boys used to hold seances when they were younger and call up the dead, which Richard finds interesting. After that, Rebecca asks the man if he's excited about the exhibition, to which Richard responds that he is more than William. He also points out that William has grown more sensitive with age. Pissed, William decides to call it a night and instructs Rebecca to put their son to bed. Before Richard leaves, he invites William to his house to show his paintings again, but William believes he should invite Joe instead. However, Richard states that Joe would never understand his work, so he gives his calling card to William, hoping he'll change his mind. Afterward, Rebecca confronts her husband, saying he was rude, but William thinks that she was fawning over Richard like a schoolgirl. Rebecca argues that Richard is William's only friend who succeeded as an artist, making it clear she didn't like how he treated the man. Additionally, Rebecca mentions that William is acting strange and people at the gallery noticed it too. She doesn't understand why William barely comes home, and when he does, it's like he's disappearing. Hurt, Rebecca asks her husband if he's drinking again. Wanting to be honest, William tries to explain how Richard and his work affects him, saying the darkness has a way of catching him. However, Rebecca simply states that life is not always beautiful. Later, William has another nightmare. This time, he's tied to the bed and some men show up around him, chanting something. Suddenly, the witch appears before him with a saw, mercilessly decapitating his head. Eventually, William awakens to James's screams. Wasting no time, Rebecca and William rush to the boy's room and find the frightened child rambling incoherently. William sees a dark entity by the window, immediately assuming that Richard has something to do with it. So he grabs a gun and heads to the cemetery to confront Richard. Furious, William tells him to stay away from his family. Richard says he thought they were friends, but William replies that the balance of their friendship is paid. Still, Richard refuses to lose the person whose judgment he seriously values. Richard then invites him again to his place to view his finest works. However, William still refuses and leaves. Determined to show his work to William, Richard follows him, promises to stay away from his family, pull out of the exhibition, and destroy his paintings if the man considers them unsuitable. Hoping to end his nightmare, William agrees to view Richard's work. That night, they arrive at Richard's place. The house is messy, but Richard states his work is paramount. Then, as William notices the doors to the dining room, it is revealed that Richard's house is the one he saw in his nightmare. After that, Richard informs William that the electricity went out several months ago, so they need to use lamps. Richard leads William through a narrow passageway with walls covered with his illustrations. At the same time, Richard asks William if he can feel the fear and states that the place is infested with rats. The older man then proceeds to the basement but asks William for a couple of minutes before he enters. However, William hears Richard arguing with someone, so he follows him. In the basement, William hears growling noises and notices a painting moving. Then he sees a can of pure turpentine and pours it all over Richard's work. Moments later, Richard shows up, shocked at what William's doing. William insists that Richard must be stopped because his paintings infect his mind, but the man claims it's only art. Finally, William realizes that he's not the problem, blaming Richard's paintings and saying they cause madness. Remaining calm, Richard points out that it's the world that's mad, and that's what breeds fear. Then Richard tries to show William his sketchbook, but a frightened William panics and thinks he's reaching for something else. So, William shoots Richard, who quickly falls to the floor. Although he's hurt, Richard tells William to paint what he sees and what is familiar to him. He also admits that the entities in his paintings are real and close to him. Then he reveals that the paintings don't come from his head, saying they come from his life. In disbelief, William burns all of Richard's artworks. Now, Richard states it's time for William to meet the entities, wanting him to see what awaits them all in the darkness. As Richard dies, a creature suddenly appears from the well and drags him into it. Meanwhile, William takes one last look at the place before fleeing. The following day, William brings his family to the exhibition. Rebecca compliments the place, saying it's extraordinary, and her husband tells her to explore. When Rebecca and James look around, William asks Gabriel where Joe is, since he was supposed to be there that morning. But Gabriel informs him that Joe came in last night to make some final adjustments, adding that Joe is still at the gallery. So, William looks for Joe and notices Richard's paintings on the wall, undamaged. As he spots Joe in front of another painting and approaches him, he realizes his friend is chanting. Then, when the guy turns around, William sees his disfigured and bloody face. Joe says someone is coming from the other side, which frightens William. With no time to waste, he rushes to find Gabriel to remove all the paintings. Unfortunately, William finds his wife and son looking at one of Richard's paintings. Worried, he quickly takes it down and asks Rebecca to go home with James. Afterward, William informs Gabriel that Joe is hurt and instructs him to destroy all of Richard's works immediately, reminding him not to look at them. Then, William leaves to get some help. Upon arriving home, William finds Rebecca preparing food in the kitchen and assures her that things will improve. In response, his wife calmly tells him she knows where fear lives. Rebecca then turns around and reveals that she gouged her eyes out. William sobs as he sees his wife affected by Richard's painting. Scared, he asks where James is, and soon realizes that his wife has killed their son. As if that wasn't enough, she used his body parts to make their food, and William finally breaks down as he finds James's head in the oven.
Subscribe to watch more videos like this. Turn on notifications. And leave a like, it really helps the channel out. Thank you for watching.